My name is Amara Odhiambo, and I am from Kisumu, Kenya. Though I spent the greater part of my adult years operating along the coast in Malindi and its surrounding regions. For 14 years, I served as a senior operative within a witchcraft network that extended across the East African coastline and into several inland territories. My particular assignment within that network was specific and strategic. I was tasked with studying the prayer patterns of devoted believers, identifying the windows when their spiritual engagement was most consistent, and then coordinating targeted operations to interrupt, suppress, or neutralize the effectiveness of those prayers. I was highly skilled at this work. I understood precisely when to introduce distraction, when to deploy spirits of confusion, when to manufacture crises that would consume the believer's time and attention, and when to send our most powerful assigned spirits to create barriers between the believer and the divine realm. But there were 3 specific times of day that I came to fear above all others. 3 windows in the daily cycle that, no matter what our network assembled against them, no matter what rituals we performed, no matter what sacrifices were made or what forces were deployed, we could not successfully block a believer who prayed during those times with genuine faith and consistent intentionality. And today I am going to reveal exactly what those 3 times are. These are not random suggestions. These are not arbitrary spiritual customs. These are windows in time that carry such extraordinary divine authority, such concentrated heavenly backing, such concentrated spiritual power, that when a believer engages them with discipline and faith, their prayers function like precision strikes in the spirit realm that systematically dismantle every dark assignment operating against their life. Before I tell you what those 3 times are, I need you to understand something fundamental about how the spirit realm actually operates, because this understanding will determine how seriously you take what I am about to share. Timing in the spiritual realm is not incidental, it is structural. Just as the natural world has seasons, cycles, and moments when certain conditions are optimal for certain outcomes, the spiritual world operates according to times and windows that carry distinct levels of power and activity. In the kingdom of darkness, we lived and operated entirely according to spiritual timing. We had designated hours for our most powerful ritual work. We had specific moments in the cycle of each day when demonic activity was at its highest concentration. We gathered at appointed times. We launched assignments at appointed times. We performed ceremonies at appointed times. And we also knew, with the kind of knowledge that only comes from operating in that realm directly, that there were specific times when a praying believer could walk into the spiritual atmosphere and completely collapse everything we had been building. That is why one of our most consistent and highest priority strategies was to prevent believers from discovering these 3 times and praying in them consistently. We worked hard to keep people away from these windows. We manufactured distractions. We sent assigned spirits of heaviness and sleep. We created sudden emergencies, family crises, financial pressures, and urgent responsibilities that would make a person too consumed or too exhausted to pray during these specific hours. Because we understood something that most believers did not. If a believer discovered the power of these 3 prayer windows and began to use them with regularity, our operations against that person would not simply be weakened, they would collapse entirely. Let me tell you how I came to understand the first critical prayer time. When I was first brought into full operational status within our network, the senior practitioners who trained me were very specific about one thing. The most dangerous window for our operations was the early morning, specifically the period between 4 and 6 in the morning. They called it the hour of divine visitation. And they drilled into every new operative that if we could keep believers spiritually inactive during that window, we could maintain control over the direction of their entire day. I did not fully understand the mechanics of why this was so powerful until I was assigned to investigate a minister in Malindi named Pastor Baraka. He was not a prominent figure in any national sense. His congregation was modest, perhaps 80 to 120 people on any given week. But what was happening inside and around that congregation was drawing our network's attention in a serious way. People who attended his services were experiencing genuine transformation. Long-standing demonic oppressions were lifting. Marriages that our operatives had worked to destroy were being restored. Young men and women who had been drawn into secret societies and occult affiliations were renouncing those ties and walking free. Our network needed to understand what was fueling this, and more importantly, we needed to find a way to stop it. I was sent to observe Pastor Baraka from the spirit realm, to study his patterns, identify his weaknesses, and locate the access point through which we could launch a successful attack against him and his ministry. I observed him for several weeks, and what I found transformed my understanding of spiritual warfare more than anything I had encountered in years of operation. Every single morning, without deviation, Pastor Baraka woke at 4:30. Not approximately 4:30, precisely 4:30. And before any other action, before any engagement with his phone or his household or his responsibilities, he would go to his knees beside his bed and enter into prayer. The consistency of this practice was almost impossible to believe. I watched him on mornings when he had returned home from ministry as late as 1 in the previous night, functioning on 3.5 hours of sleep at most. I thought that morning would be the one where he stayed in bed. At 4:30 his alarm sounded. Within 2 minutes he was on his knees. I watched him on a morning when his youngest child had been unwell through the night. He and his wife had taken turns attending to the child, and neither had slept adequately. I was certain that morning would break the pattern. At 4:30 he was praying, and the first words out of his mouth were declarations of healing and restoration spoken over his child's body. I watched him on the morning before a meeting that carried significant implications for the future of his ministry. A meeting with officials that would determine whether the church could access property for expansion. I anticipated that he would use those early hours to rehearse his position, to review documents, to plan his approach. Instead, he spent the first 20 minutes of his prayer time in complete silence, not speaking, simply positioned before the divine in a posture of listening. And after that extended silence, he began to pray with a precision of direction that I had rarely encountered. He prayed about specific aspects of that meeting, specific people who would be present, specific concerns that would arise, and specific outcomes to pray toward. It was as though every detail of that meeting had been downloaded into him during those 20 minutes of stillness. The character of his early morning prayers was distinct from anything he prayed at other hours of the day. There was a quality of intimacy in them, a freshness that did not exist at other times. It was as though the distance between the natural and divine realms was thinner during those hours, as though the access to heaven's counsel was more immediate and more direct. I attempted to disrupt his early morning prayer repeatedly. I sent spirits specifically assigned to induce deep sleep. I orchestrated minor household disturbances designed to throw off his routine. I attempted to introduce spirits of scattered thinking into his prayer time to reduce its focus and power. Nothing I deployed had any effect. It was as if a protective atmosphere surrounded him during those early hours that my assignment simply could not penetrate. Then I began to observe the relationship between what he prayed in the early morning and what manifested throughout the rest of his day. The correlation was unmistakable. If he prayed healing over a specific individual during those early hours, that individual would often come to the church later in the day carrying a testimony of physical change. If he prayed for financial provision for a ministry need in the morning, an unexpected call offering a donation would frequently arrive before noon. If he covered his household with prayers of protection in the morning, the assignments we attempted to execute against his family throughout that day would fail consistently, as though a boundary had been drawn that our forces could not cross. The early morning prayer was not simply a personal devotional exercise. It was the spiritual architecture for the entire day. Heaven was responding to what was declared in those hours, and the day itself was unfolding according to those declarations. When I brought my report back to the senior leadership of our network, the response I received was not surprise. Our regional leader said to me directly, "The early morning is when the divine realm is most attentive to the prayers of those who are aligned with its purposes." That is why we invest so heavily in keeping believers in their beds during those hours. A believer who prays consistently in the early morning seals their day before we can impose our agenda onto it. You cannot touch that day. It has already been claimed. That is the first critical prayer time. The early morning, the window between 4 and 6 before sunrise. This is the hour when the divine visits those who position themselves to receive. This is when heaven's counsel flows most freely. This is when you can receive direction, strategy, and wisdom for everything ahead of you. This is when the spiritual atmosphere of your day is established before the noise and demands of the world have any opportunity to crowd in. The reason this time is so powerful goes beyond personal discipline. In the spirit realm, the early hours of the morning are when dark assignments for the coming day are being organized and dispatched. When a believer prays during this window, they are not simply opening their day with good intention. They are intercepting the enemy's agenda before it can be activated. They are creating a spiritual covering over their day that functions as a preemptive strike against everything that was being prepared against them. I knew a woman in Malindi named Sister Rehema. She was a market trader, a small business owner who ran a fabric stall in the main market. Our network had targeted her because she had publicly refused to participate in the cooperative occult practices that many of the established traders in that market maintained. She had declined initiation. She had refused to make the required offerings, and our network considered this a visible defiance that needed to be answered. We cursed her business. We sent assigned spirits to divert her customers. We worked to create loss in her inventory and financial confusion in her accounts. Month after month, we applied these assignments against her, and month after month, her business refused to collapse. I was given direct responsibility for her case, and I could not understand why every operation we launched against her was failing. Then I discovered her discipline. Every morning at 5, before she went to the market, Sister Rehema prayed. She would speak declarations of protection over her business, over her customers, over the work of her hands. She would declare that every assignment against her livelihood was cancelled. She would ask the divine to prosper what she was committed to and to close every door of loss and confusion. She was consistent. She was specific. She was unwavering. And it did not matter what our network attempted during the day. By the time her working hours began, her business had already been sealed by morning prayer. Customers that we attempted to redirect toward competitor stalls would end up at hers as though drawn by something they could not explain. Inventory that we sought to damage would arrive and remain in perfect condition. Financial channels that we blocked would open through sources she had not anticipated. After 6 months of fruitless effort, I was told to release the assignment. Our leadership said she prays in the early morning. Her day is established before we begin our work. There is no point of entry while she maintains that discipline. That is what early morning prayer does. It establishes the day. It sets the spiritual atmosphere. It downloads the divine agenda before the darkness can impose its own. And a believer who develops this discipline becomes someone our network had no effective strategy against. Now let me tell you about the second critical prayer time. And this one, in my years of operation, was the one that provoked the most intense response from our network when we encountered it. It is midnight prayer. In the kingdom of darkness, midnight is our most active hour. It is when our most significant gatherings take place. It is when our most powerful ritual work is performed. It is when demonic operations are at their highest level of intensity and coordination. And the reason for this is directly connected to one simple fact. Midnight is when the vast majority of believers are asleep. The spiritual defenses of most households are at their lowest. The watch is down, the prayers have stopped, and we can move with minimal resistance. But there existed a category of believers who understood the spiritual weight of midnight and would deliberately wake to pray during that hour. And these believers represented the most serious threat to our operations that we encountered at any time. When a believer wakes at midnight and prays, they are not simply fulfilling a discipline. They are entering the spirit realm at precisely the moment when our activity is highest and most concentrated. Their presence, their declarations, their faith disrupt everything we are attempting to coordinate. The image I would use is the sudden ignition of a powerful light in a space that had been completely dark. Everything that was operating in that darkness scatters. It cannot function. It cannot sustain its assignments. It flees. There was a family in Malindi that our entire network was assembled against at one point. The husband worked in public administration. His wife was an educator. They had 3 children together. The reason they became a target was that the husband had uncovered and openly reported serious financial corruption within his department. Several of the individuals implicated in that corruption had direct connections to practitioners within our network, and through those connections, a coordinated assignment was commissioned against this family. We began with standard operations. We sent sickness against the children. We applied financial pressure. We worked to plant misunderstandings and conflict within the marriage. And for the first several weeks, it appeared that the operations were taking root. The children were falling ill with frequency. The husband was facing professional consequences from the report he had filed. The wife was overwhelmed, and the household was under visible strain. Then something shifted. The couple made a decision, though I never was able to determine exactly what prompted it, to begin waking at midnight each night to pray together. They committed to 1 hour of midnight prayer. And from the first night they implemented this, everything our network had been building began to unravel. I was present in the spirit realm, monitoring their home when they first woke and began praying that midnight. The experience I observed is difficult to describe accurately. When they opened their mouths and began declaring divine protection and authority over their household, it was as though the spiritual atmosphere of that home detonated. The assigned spirits we had stationed within and around that home were immediately displaced. The curses we had spoken were broken. The assignments we had active against specific members of the family were destroyed. I attempted to push spirits back toward that home, and they could not enter. There was a barrier present during those midnight prayers that nothing we deployed could cross. Our network leadership called an emergency meeting after the second night. The regional elder was furious. She demanded to know who had shared information about midnight prayer with this couple. She said, "This is our hour. They have no business being awake during this time." She ordered our strongest assigned spirits to be directed against them, specifically to induce such exhaustion during the day that they would be unable to wake at midnight. But the couple maintained their commitment despite everything we threw at it. Let me walk you through some of what we attempted, because understanding the tactics used against midnight prayer will help you recognize them in your own experience and push through them. On the third night, we applied heavy spirits of fatigue to them throughout the entire day. By the time they went to bed, they were barely functional. When their alarm sounded at midnight, the wife woke, but the husband was in such deep sleep that she could not rouse him easily. Most people in that situation would have decided to pray alone or to let the night pass. She got a damp cloth, pressed it against his face, and said to him, "We made a commitment. We are not missing tonight." He was on his feet within minutes, and they prayed. On the fifth night, we engineered a crisis. Their youngest child woke at 11:45 with sharp abdominal pain. Both parents attended to the child, administered medicine, stayed with him until he settled. By the time the child was resting peacefully, it was past 12:30. Most people would have concluded that midnight prayer was not possible that night and slept. This couple said, "It does not matter that the clock has moved. We are still praying." They prayed from 12:30 until nearly 2 in the morning. On the seventh night, we shifted strategy and sent spirits of doubt. We whispered into their thoughts, "Look around you. Nothing has changed. You are losing sleep for a discipline that is producing no visible results." When the alarm sounded that night, the husband voiced the doubt aloud to his wife. He said, "Maybe this is not working. Maybe we should reconsider." She looked at him and said, "What we are doing is not measured by what we can see in the natural. Something is happening in the spirit. I believe that. Let us pray." And they did. On the 10th night, we tried to break their agreement with each other. During the course of that day, we planted a small offense between them that escalated into a significant disagreement. By bedtime, they had withdrawn from each other and were not communicating. I was certain that two people in conflict would not be able to pray in genuine agreement. When midnight arrived and the alarm sounded, the wife got out of bed, walked to her husband's side, and said softly, "I do not want to hold on to this. I am sorry. Can we pray?" He said, "I am sorry as well." "Yes, let us pray." They reconciled in less than 3 minutes and then prayed together for the full hour. It was at that moment that I recognized what we were dealing with. This was not simply two people who had decided to follow a spiritual discipline. This was a partnership rooted in a commitment so deep that no manufactured crisis, no induced exhaustion, no planted conflict, no whispered doubt could dismantle it. Within 1 month of their midnight prayer practice, the husband received a professional appointment superior to the position he had been threatened with losing. The children's health was completely restored. The marriage that we had worked to strain became visibly stronger than it had been before our assignment began. Everything our network had invested into destroying this family was reversed. That is what midnight prayer does. It confronts the kingdom of darkness at the precise hour when it believes it is operating without resistance. It is the spiritual equivalent of showing up on the enemy's ground during his most active hours and enforcing divine authority there. The ancient texts speak of two prisoners who prayed at midnight, and the result was an earthquake that shook the foundations of the prison. opened every door, and broke every chain. That is not a historical curiosity, that is a principle. Midnight prayer shakes foundations. It breaks what seems permanently fixed. It opens what seems permanently closed. There was a young man I will call Brother Taita. He was in his mid-20s and had been formally initiated into a secret society during his university years. He had taken binding oaths. He had participated in ritual ceremonies that created legal spiritual ties to the kingdom of darkness. And even after he renounced those affiliations and committed his life to the path of the divine, the spiritual oppression did not lift. He experienced nightmares with consistent regularity. He felt a heaviness that did not respond to prayer or fasting during daylight hours. He went to several ministers for deliverance, experienced temporary relief, and then found the attacks returning. He was faithful in his daytime spiritual disciplines and could not understand why he was not walking in the freedom he expected. An older believer eventually told him something specific. The spirits attacking you are night spirits. They operate during the dark hours. You need to confront them during their own time. You need to enforce your freedom at midnight, when they are most active and when a praying believer's authority is most devastating to their operations. Brother Taita began waking at midnight to pray. The first several nights were difficult. He felt oppressed the moment he woke. There was a weight in the room that was tangible. On one night he saw manifestations that would have driven most people from the room entirely. But he opened his mouth and began to declare divine protection and authority over his life. He commanded every oppressing spirit to leave in the authority of the name above all names. He spoke cleansing over his sleeping space. He declared the finished work of the cross over every oath and covenant he had entered. And as he declared these things, the spiritual atmosphere of that room changed. I was one of the assigned spirits operating against him during that period, and I can tell you directly what his midnight prayers did to our operations. Each night he prayed. The legal ground we were standing on to maintain our access to him was eroded. The oaths he had taken in the secret society, which gave us covenantal access to his life, were being broken declaration by declaration. The nightmare patterns that had been our primary tool of torment were being dismantled at their root. By the end of 30 days of consistent midnight prayer, the nightmares had stopped entirely. The oppression had lifted. The heaviness was gone. And he later described one midnight during that period when he had a vision of brilliant light filling his room and a voice that spoke clearly to him, "Every chain is broken. You are free. Walk in it." That is midnight prayer. It is not about discomfort or religious performance. It is about understanding that there is a battle occurring during the dark hours, and that a believer who chooses to be active and praying during those hours changes the outcome of that battle decisively. Now let me tell you about the third critical prayer time. And this one carries a weight that is unlike any other hour of the day. It is 3 o'clock in the afternoon. 3 in the afternoon is the hour that history records as the moment when the greatest act of sacrifice in the spiritual realm was completed. It is the hour when the cry went out, "It is finished." And because of what was accomplished in that moment, 3 o'clock in the afternoon carries a spiritual authority that no dark force has an answer for. In our network, we were explicitly taught to fear believers who prayed at 3 in the afternoon. We were told that this was the hour when divine mercy was most concentrated, when the power of the blood of the covenant was most loudly proclaimed, when heaven's attention was most fully directed toward those who called out in faith. There was an elderly minister in Malindi named Elder Muthoni. He did not operate a large congregation. He had no public platform of note. But people came to him from across the coastal region seeking prayer, because when he prayed for people, results followed with a consistency that was impossible to dismiss. Sicknesses that had not responded to medical treatment were healed. Spiritual oppressions that had tormented families for generations were lifted. Financial chains that had bound households for years were broken. Our network wanted to understand the mechanism behind his effectiveness and neutralize it. I was assigned to observe him, and what I found was almost disarmingly simple. Every afternoon at precisely 3 o'clock, Elder Muthoni stopped everything he was doing, went to a private space in his home, and prayed for no less than 30 minutes. And the entire focus of those prayers was the finished work of the sacrifice made at that hour long ago. He would give thanks for what was accomplished. He would apply the power of the covenant blood over specific situations. He would declare that every curse over a specific person or family was broken by what happened at that hour. He would declare that every chain was destroyed by the power of that completed work. And the spiritual force released through those prayers was unlike anything I had witnessed at any other time. It was as if every word he spoke was being amplified by the full weight of heaven's agreement. It was as if the voice of the covenant blood itself was speaking alongside his words, and there was no dark force assembled that had an answer for it. I tried every available strategy to disrupt his 3 o'clock prayer. I manufactured distractions. I sent people to arrive at his door with urgent needs at precisely that hour. I created confusion that I hoped would cause him to lose track of time. None of it worked. This man's commitment to that specific hour was absolute. He treated it as a scheduled appointment with divine authority that nothing could cancel. And the results that came from those prayers vindicated his commitment consistently. When I asked our network's senior leadership why 3 o'clock prayer was so devastatingly effective, the answer I received has stayed with me ever since. They said, at 3 in the afternoon, the entire divine realm remembers what was accomplished at that hour. And when a believer prays at that time with understanding of what they are standing on, they are praying in alignment with the greatest demonstration of power ever witnessed in all of creation. The covenant blood speaks at 3 o'clock, and we have no answer for the blood. We never have. We never will. That is the power of the 3 o'clock prayer hour. It is praying in direct alignment with the most significant event in spiritual history. It is standing in the authority of a work that was completed, finished, and sealed at that precise hour. It is the window of mercy, when what was accomplished overcomes every accusation, every curse, every dark pronouncement, every seemingly impossible situation. Let me give you a testimony that demonstrates this with specific detail. There was a woman in Malindi known to her community as Mama Salama. She had a son who had been bound by substance addiction for many years. He had gone through rehabilitation programs more than once. He had returned to his habit each time. He had caused significant damage to family relationships and to himself. He was on a path that led clearly toward destruction, and every natural intervention had reached its limit. Mama Salama had prayed for her son for years with the kind of faithfulness that only a mother who loves a child can sustain. She had fasted. She had sought prayer from ministers. She had wept more nights than she could count, and the situation had not changed. Then someone told her something specific. They told her about the power of praying at 3 o'clock each afternoon, and they specifically instructed her to direct those prayers toward the application of covenant blood over her son's life at that hour. She began setting an alarm for 3 o'clock each afternoon, and when that alarm sounded, regardless of where she was or what she was doing, she would stop and pray. She would say, "At this hour, by the power of the blood of the covenant that was poured out, I cover my son. Every addiction is broken. Every demonic hold is destroyed. Every dark assignment over his life is cancelled. I stand on what was finished at this hour, and I claim that finished work over my child's life right now." She prayed in this way every single day at 3 o'clock for 3 months. I was among the assigned spirits operating to maintain the hold of addiction over her son during that period. And I can tell you with complete honesty that those prayers were systematically dismantling our operation. Every day at 3 o'clock, I felt the power of what she was invoking, breaking the chains we had fastened around him. The legal spiritual access we were using to perpetuate his addiction was being revoked piece by piece. The covenants he had unknowingly entered through the practices that surrounded his addiction were being annulled one by one. During the first month, nothing was visible in the natural. He was still using. He was still deceiving his family. He was still descending. But in the spirit realm, the structure of what we had built around him was being dismantled daily. During the second month, we shifted our focus and attacked Mama Salama directly. We sent spirits of discouragement. We positioned people in her life to speak hopeless words over her son's situation. We made her physically unwell to weaken her discipline, but she did not miss a single day at 3 o'clock. There were afternoons when she prayed through tears of exhaustion. There were days when her body was struggling, but at 3 o'clock she prayed, and every afternoon at 3 o'clock she said the same thing. "By the power of the blood of the covenant, my son is free. I do not pray based on what I see. I pray based on what was accomplished." In the third month, we had lost the battle. The legal structure we had used to hold her son was completely gone in the spirit realm. All that remained was for him to exercise the freedom that had already been secured. And then one afternoon, at precisely 3 o'clock, her son was in a location where he was about to continue in his habit, and something intervened that he could not explain naturally. He later described it as though an invisible hand physically stopped him. He could not complete the action he was attempting, and in the stillness of that moment, something broke inside him, and he wept and said, "I need help. I need to change." That evening he came to his mother and told her he was ready for genuine help. From that day he never returned to addiction. He walked completely free. And today he works alongside a ministry that serves young people in the same bondage he once lived in. That is 3 o'clock prayer. It is the hour of mercy. It is the hour when the work of the covenant overrides every curse, every chain, every addiction, every impossible situation. Now let me tell you what happens when a believer combines all three of these prayer windows into a consistent practice. There was a pastor in Malindi named Elder Kamau. He was in his early 40s and had established a congregation in a neighborhood that was heavily saturated with occult activity. Many of the prominent families in that community maintained long-standing connections to witchcraft and marine practices. When Elder Kamau began preaching and ministering in that neighborhood, our network treated it as a territorial threat and mobilized a coordinated response. We attacked his health. We created conflicts within his congregation. We applied pressure to his household. We sought to discourage him through consistent opposition until he would abandon the work. During the first year, it appeared that we were successfully grinding him down. His congregation was not growing. He was fighting problems on every front. He was exhausted and visibly losing confidence in the work. Then Elder Kamau attended a gathering where a minister spoke with specific authority about the strategic use of prayer times. This minister spoke directly about the early morning window, the midnight hour, and the 3 o'clock hour as the three most powerful points of prayer engagement in the daily cycle. Elder Kamau made a decision. He committed to engaging all 3 times every single day for 90 days, and he did not approach these times casually. In the early morning, he used that time to receive strategy and direction for his ministry and his community. At midnight, he prayed specific warfare prayers, naming and binding the dark forces he knew were operating in that neighborhood. At 3 o'clock, he prayed prayers of mercy over the people in that area, calling for souls to be reached and spiritual chains to be broken over the community. The transformation that followed was not gradual, it was sweeping. Within the first month, I watched our network's influence in that neighborhood begin to destabilize. The spirits we had assigned to block his ministry were losing their functional capacity. The curses we had maintained against his congregation were breaking. The people we had worked to keep hostile toward him began to soften without any natural explanation. In the second month, people from the community began attending his services, not occasional visitors, but people who had been deeply embedded in occult practices for years. They were coming, hearing, and being genuinely freed. Oppressions that had run in families for generations were lifting. In the third month, our network held an emergency council. The language used in that meeting was frank. We had lost control of that neighborhood. Our established strongholds were being dismantled. The altars our operatives had maintained in that area were being spiritually brought down. People who had been loyal clients of occult practitioners were going to Elder Kamau's congregation, seeking the freedom they were finding there, and there was nothing we could coordinate in response. By the end of 90 days, the congregation had grown from its original small number to over 200 consistent members. The spiritual atmosphere of the entire neighborhood had shifted in ways that even non-believers in the community could sense and acknowledge. That is what happens when a believer combines all 3 strategic prayer times. The early morning seals the day before the darkness can set its agenda. The midnight hour confronts dark operations at the peak of their activity. The 3 o'clock hour applies covenant authority to every impossible situation and releases mercy over every life being prayed for. And when these 3 are operating together consistently, the believer becomes a force that no dark network has a functional strategy against. I understand what some of you are considering right now. You are asking yourself how it is practically possible to wake before 5 in the morning, be alert enough to wake at midnight, and also pause your afternoon for prayer at 3 o'clock. You have a profession, you have a household, you have responsibilities that are real and demanding. And I want to speak to that honestly. You do not need hours at each of these times. The power is not in the volume of words or the duration of the session. The power is in the timing and the intentionality of what you bring to it. 15 minutes of focused, faith-filled prayer in the right window is more effective than 2 hours of unfocused spiritual routine at a random time. If you are beginning this practice, start with 1. Choose the early morning. Set your alarm 30 minutes earlier than your current waking time, and give those 30 minutes to prayer before anything else, before your phone, before conversation, before the business of the day enters your awareness. Let the first spiritual activity of your day be the establishment of divine protection and direction over everything that follows. Do that for 30 days until it is a settled pattern. When that is established, add the 3 o'clock prayer. Set an alarm on your device. When it sounds, find 30 seconds to relocate if necessary, and give 10 to 15 focus minutes to prayer at that hour. You have 10 minutes. Find it. Focus on applying covenant authority over your life and your household. Declare that the work of the sacrifice accomplished at that hour overrides every curse and chain over your situation. When both of those are consistent, begin introducing midnight prayer. You do not need to begin every night. Start with once a week. Choose a specific night. Set an alarm for 11:45 so you have time to wake fully and be alert by midnight, and pray warfare prayers for 30 minutes. Bind dark operations against your household. Dismantle assignments before they can execute. Enforce divine authority over the ground that darkness has been treating as its own. As your capacity grows, increase the frequency. The principle is this: begin, be consistent, build progressively, do not attempt perfection from the first day. The goal is a sustainable, growing practice that deepens over time. After I was freed from the kingdom of darkness and began walking a new path, one of the first things I did was seek out Pastor Baraka, the minister in Malindi whose early morning prayers I had spent months trying to disrupt when I was an operative. I told him who I was. I told him what my assignment against him had been. I told him that it was specifically his early morning prayers that had made him impenetrable to everything our network attempted against him. He listened to everything I said, and then he looked at me with a quality of compassion that I was not prepared for. He said, "Sister, I am not surprised by what you have told me. That early morning time has been the foundation of everything for more than 2 decades. And now that you are free, I want to help you learn to use the same protection for your own life." He was the one who taught me about all 3 strategic prayer times from the perspective of someone who had walked in them for years, and I began implementing them in my own daily practice, and I can speak from personal experience about what they have produced. The early morning prayer grounds me and establishes clarity before the demands of the day can crowd it out. The midnight prayer keeps me alert to the reality of the battle happening around me and positioned to engage it with authority. The 3 o'clock prayer fills me with gratitude and reinforces the understanding that the victory I am standing on is not something I have to earn or manufacture. It was won. It is finished. And I am simply enforcing it. Right now, I want to pray with you. I want you to speak this aloud wherever you are, because spoken declarations carry weight in the spirit realm. Open your mouth and say this: Sovereign of the universe, I come before you in gratitude and faith. I thank you for the revelation of these 3 strategic windows of prayer. I thank you that they are not burdensome obligations, but divine appointments where I can access your power, receive your direction, and enforce your authority over every dark assignment against my life. I commit to rising in the early morning. Grant me the discipline to leave my bed when the hour calls. Help me to prioritize this window above comfort and convenience. And when I pray in those early hours, let my prayers seal the spiritual atmosphere of my day. Let me receive strategy and wisdom. Let me establish your agenda before any other agenda can be set. I commit to the midnight hour. Grant me the grace and the resolve to intercept dark operations at the time when they are most active. Help me to confront darkness on its own ground and enforce divine authority there. Let my midnight prayers shake every foundation that should not stand. Let them break every chain that has been assembled against my life, my family, and my community. I commit to the 3 o'clock prayer. Let this be my hour of mercy and covenant authority. Let this be the time when I apply the power of the finished work over every situation that has seemed impossible. Let this be the moment when I declare what was accomplished at that hour and enforce its results over my life and the lives of those I carry in prayer. Give me supernatural strength to maintain these disciplines. When I am exhausted, renew me. When I am discouraged, remind me of what these times produce. When distraction attempts to pull me away, draw me back. Let these 3 windows become the unshakable foundation of my prayer life. And as I pray at these times with consistency and faith, let my prayers function as precision strikes against every dark assignment over my life. Let every curse be broken. Let every monitoring spirit lose its access. Let every dark assignment be cancelled. Let every operation assembled against me be frustrated at its root. I declare that because I rise in the early morning, my day is established in divine protection before any attack can be launched against it. I declare that because I pray at midnight, I enforce divine authority over the spirit realm during the enemy's most active hours. I declare that because I pray at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I stand in the power of the finished work, and every impossible situation in my life bows to that completed victory. From this day, I am a believer who understands spiritual timing. I am a prayer warrior who knows when to engage in the spirit realm. And because of these 3 commitments, every dark assignment against my life is being systematically dismantled. Every chain is broken. Every monitoring spirit is blinded. Every dark altar assembled against me crumbles. I am covered. I am backed by the authority of heaven. And my prayers at these strategic times are destroying every work of darkness. Let it be established. Amen. If you pray those words with me, something has shifted in the spirit realm over your life. The 3 strategic prayer windows have been activated. And as you begin to pray in them consistently, you will see breakthroughs that no amount of prayer at random times produced for you before. But hear this clearly. This is not a mystical formula. This is not a ritual you perform for its effects. The power of these times is rooted in who you are in alignment with, in the authority you carry as someone genuinely surrendered to the divine, and in the finished work that backs every prayer you pray. The times matter because of the spiritual architecture of the reality we live in. But your faith, your intentionality, and your consistency are what make the times effective in your specific life. Let me give you the practical steps clearly. For the early morning prayer, set your alarm 30 minutes earlier than you currently wake. Keep it across the room, so you must physically rise to silence it. When you are up, go immediately to your place of prayer before engaging anything else. Pray for direction. Pray for protection over your household. Declare divine covering over your day and over every responsibility you carry. Do this for 30 days until it is no longer an effort but a settled instinct. For the 3 o'clock prayer, set an alarm on your device for 3 p.m. When it sounds, relocate if necessary and give focused prayer for 10 to 15 minutes. Focus on applying covenant authority over your life and the lives of those you are interceding for. Declare that the power of the finished work overrides every curse and bondage in the situations you carry. You can pray in your vehicle, in an empty room, wherever you can find a minute of privacy. 10 focus minutes is enough. For the midnight prayer, choose one specific night each week to begin. Set your alarm for 11:45 to give yourself time to wake fully and be alert by midnight. Pray warfare declarations. Bind dark operations over your household. Cancel specific assignments you are aware of. Enforce divine authority over your sleeping space and your family. Pray for 30 minutes. As this becomes more natural, increase the frequency. Build these habits progressively. Do not attempt all 3 at maximum intensity from the first week. Start with 1, establish it, add the second, establish it, add the third. This is not a sprint. It is a sustained, deepening practice that will transform your spiritual authority over time. You will face obstacles. Know them in advance. Tiredness will come. The kingdom of darkness sends spirits of extreme fatigue specifically to undermine early morning and midnight prayer. Counter this by adjusting your bedtime. If you are rising at 4:30, you cannot remain awake past midnight without cost. Restructure your evening. Sleep earlier, and ask the divine for supernatural renewal when natural rest is not enough. I have seen people sustain through these prayer times on amounts of sleep that should not have been sufficient. The divine honors the commitment. Busyness will come. Your afternoon will fill itself with urgencies that make 3 o'clock prayer feel impossible. Schedule it the way you schedule every non-negotiable appointment. Put it in your calendar. Treat it as a meeting that cannot be moved. You have 10 minutes. Protect them. Discouragement will come. In the first weeks, you may pray with consistency and see nothing visibly shifting. The enemy counts on this. He hopes you will conclude that nothing is happening and abandon the practice. Know that spiritual breakthrough precedes natural breakthrough. What is being dismantled in the spirit realm will manifest in the natural. Keep praying. The breakthrough is approaching. Do not stop before it arrives. Inconsistency will come. You will miss a day, then two, then a week will pass. Do not allow this to defeat you. If you miss a day, begin again the next day. The goal is not an unbroken record of perfection. The goal is a consistent practice that deepens over time. Every day you return is a day you advance. Every day you engage is a day the darkness loses ground. If this message has opened something in your understanding today, do not hold it. Share it. There are believers in your life right now who are praying faithfully but are not aware of the power available in these specific windows. They are working hard spiritually but have not been taught about strategic timing. You can be the one who brings this to them. You can be the one who equips another believer to pray with precision rather than simply praying with persistence. By sharing this, you are not passing along information. You are equipping someone to fight more effectively. Subscribe to this channel if you have not done so. Turn on notifications because I will continue bringing revelations like this one. I will continue exposing what I observed in the kingdom of darkness so that believers can use that knowledge to stand more effectively in their authority. This channel is not simply content. It is a training space for people who refuse to live in spiritual defeat, for people who want to understand the battle they are in and fight it with genuine effectiveness. Leave a comment and tell me which of these 3 prayer times you are committing to start with. Your testimony will encourage others to begin their own commitment. Your breakthrough will be the proof someone else needs to take the first step. I am Amara Odhiambo. I was once an operative in the kingdom of darkness, assigned to study and disrupt the prayer patterns of believers. The divine freed me from that life, and now I use everything I learned in darkness to equip those who walk in the light. These 3 prayer times are real. They are powerful. They work. Pray in the early morning to seal your day in divine authority before the darkness can set its agenda. Pray at midnight to confront dark operations at the height of their activity and enforce divine authority over your ground. Pray at 3 in the afternoon to stand on the power of the finished work and release mercy over every impossible situation. Do these 3 things with consistency and faith, and you will see breakthroughs that no previous level of prayer produced in your life. Your prayers will destroy every dark assignment against you. Your prayers will shake the foundations of darkness over your household and your community. Your prayers will release divine power on the earth. And let me leave you with this. You are not a lone warrior. There are believers across this continent and around the world who are discovering these prayer windows and experiencing the breakthrough that follows. You are joining a growing company of people who have decided that they will no longer pray randomly and hope for results. They will pray strategically at appointed times with the understanding that the spirit realm responds to the right prayer in the right window with extraordinary power. The kingdom of darkness fears this. It fears believers who understand timing. It fears those who pray in the early morning, at midnight, and at 3 o'clock, because those believers are not playing defense. They are advancing. They are taking ground. They are dismantling dark operations before those operations can execute. And every prayer you pray at these times contributes to an atmosphere of divine authority in your home, your city, and your generation. Make the commitment. Set the alarms. Build the discipline. And watch what the divine does in your life as you begin to pray at these 3 strategic times. May you be granted the strength to rise when the hour calls. May you be empowered to be a warrior who knows when to engage. And may your prayers at these appointed times become unstoppable forces that destroy every work of darkness and establish the purposes of the divine in your life. Amen.